The sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty trail as Rebecca Johnson urged her exhausted mare forward, her throat parched and vision blurring at the edges. 3 days with barely any water, her canteen having sprung a leak miles back, had pushed her body to its breaking point. The Montana Territory in the summer of 1878 was unforgiving to those who underestimated its vast, empty expanses, and Rebecca, city-bred and traveling alone, had made that fatal mistake. "Just a little farther, Penny," she whispered to her horse, though she wasn't sure how much farther either of them could go. The mountains loomed in the distance, seeming no closer than they had hours ago, and the trail stretched endlessly before her. Her journey to Riverside to start anew as a schoolteacher, leaving behind the tragedy that had claimed her parents in Chicago, now seemed like a fool's errand. The world began to tilt, colors blending together as black spots danced across her vision. Rebecca felt herself sliding from the saddle, unable to command her limbs to hold on. The ground rushed up to meet her as consciousness slipped away. Owen James had been tracking the lone rider for the past mile, concerned by the wavering path the horse was taking. From his vantage point on a ridge overlooking the trail, he could tell something wasn't right. When he saw the rider slip from the saddle, he spurred his stallion down the slope, dust billowing behind him. He reached the fallen traveler in moments, surprised to find a young woman lying unconscious in the dirt. Her face was flushed with heat, lips cracked and bleeding. Her clothes, too formal for frontier travel, were covered in dust, and her chestnut hair had come loose from its pins. "Miss." Owen knelt beside her, checking for injury. Finding none obvious, he gently lifted her head, pressing his canteen to her lips. "Miss, can you hear me?" When she didn't respond, Owen glanced at the setting sun. Riverside was still a good 15 miles away, and darkness would fall soon. The woman was clearly suffering from heat exhaustion and dehydration. She needed shelter and care immediately. With a decision made, Owen gathered the unconscious woman into his arms, surprised at how light she felt despite her full skirts and petticoats. He whistled for his horse, Bandit, who trotted over obediently. "Easy now," he murmured, mounting skillfully while cradling the woman against his chest. Her mare whinnied anxiously, and Owen reached for her reins. "You're coming too, little lady. Your mistress will be wanting you when she wakes." With the woman secured in front of him and leading her mare behind, Owen set off toward the foothills where he knew of a sheltered spot with a spring. The woman's head lolled against his shoulder, her breathing shallow but steady. "Hang on, miss," he said, though she couldn't hear him. "I've got you." By the time Owen reached the outcropping of rocks that sheltered the spring, the sun had dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the land. He dismounted carefully, laying the woman on a soft patch of grass while he unpacked his gear. Working quickly in the fading light, Owen gathered fallen branches and constructed a lean-to against the rock face, spreading his bedroll inside. He built a small fire, hanging his coffee pot to boil while he tended to the horses. Once the makeshift shelter was complete, Owen carried the woman inside, placing her gently on his bedroll. In the flickering firelight, he could see she was young, perhaps 20, with delicate features and long lashes resting against flushed cheeks. Her breathing seemed easier now, but she remained unconscious. Owen dampened his bandana with cool water from the spring and placed it on her forehead. He loosened her collar and removed her boots, covering her with his spare blanket. There was little else he could do until she woke. As the night deepened, Owen sat by the fire, occasionally checking on his charge and replacing the cool cloth on her forehead. Her mare and his stallion grazed nearby, seemingly at ease with each other's company. "Who are you?" Owen wondered aloud, studying the woman's face. Her clothes were of good quality but practical, not the finery of a society lady. She wore no wedding ring, and her saddlebags contained books, including a well-worn Bible with the name Rebecca Johnson inscribed inside the cover. Rebecca Johnson. He tested the name. "What brings you out here all alone, Miss Johnson?" The night wore on, and Owen dozed by the fire, waking every hour to check on her. It was near dawn when he heard a soft moan from the shelter. He moved quickly to her side, finding her eyes fluttering open, confusion evident in their hazel depths. "Easy now," Owen said softly. "You're safe." Rebecca's vision swam into focus, revealing a man's face hovering above her, a stranger with kind blue eyes and a sun-weathered face framed by dark blonde hair. She tried to speak, but found her throat too dry for words. Anticipating her need, Owen held a canteen to her lips. "Small sips," he instructed. After drinking, Rebecca tried again. Where am I?" "Name's Owen James," he replied. "You collapsed on the trail yesterday evening. Found you and brought you here about 10 miles from where you fell." "Your horse is fine," he added, seeing the question in her eyes before she could ask. Rebecca struggled to sit up, but Owen gently pressed her back down. "Best rest a while longer. You were in a bad way." "I need to reach Riverside," she insisted, though her voice was weak. "I'm expected there." "Riverside's still a good ways off," Owen said. "And you're in no condition to travel just yet." He offered the canteen again. "You were suffering from heat exhaustion and dehydration. Could have died out there if I hadn't come along." Rebecca accepted the water, mortified at her situation but grudgingly aware that he was right. "Thank you for your help, Mr. James." "Owen," he corrected with a small smile. "And you're Rebecca Johnson, according to your Bible." She nodded, slightly uncomfortable that he had gone through her belongings but understanding the necessity. "Yes, I'm to be the new schoolteacher in Riverside." Owen raised an eyebrow. "Traveling alone, that's mighty dangerous for a lady." "I had little choice," Rebecca replied, a hint of defensiveness creeping into her voice. "The stagecoach route was diverted due to bridge repairs, and I couldn't afford to wait another week. The school term begins soon." Owen nodded, respecting her determination if not her judgment. "Well, you need at least a day of rest before continuing. I'll get you something to eat." As he moved back to the fire, Rebecca took stock of her situation. The shelter was crude but effective, a simple lean-to constructed of branches and canvas. Her belongings had been placed neatly beside her, and she was lying on what she presumed was Owen's bedroll. "Where did you sleep?" she asked as he returned with a tin cup of coffee and some hardtack softened in the coffee pot. "Had plenty of warm nights under the stars," Owen replied with a shrug. "This is nothing new to me." Rebecca accepted the simple meal gratefully, realizing how hungry she was. As she ate, she studied her rescuer more carefully. Owen James was tall and broad-shouldered, with the lean, muscled build of a man accustomed to physical labor. His clothes were trail-worn but clean denims, a checked shirt, and a leather vest. A gun belt hung at his side, and his boots were scuffed from years of use. Despite his rugged appearance, there was a gentleness to his movements that put her at ease. "Are you a rancher?" she asked, trying to place him. Owen shook his head. "Cowhand mostly. Worked different ranches depending on the season. Was heading to the Diamond K near Riverside for the summer roundup when I spotted you." "Then I've delayed your journey as well," Rebecca said with dismay. "Roundup doesn't start for 3 more days," Owen replied. "I'm in no hurry." Throughout the day, Rebecca regained her strength slowly. Owen tended to the horses, refilled their water supplies, and hunted a rabbit for a more substantial meal. He kept the fire small but steady, brewing coffee and heating the rabbit stew in his single pot. Rebecca insisted on sitting up by afternoon, moving to sit by the fire with Owen's help. She felt awkward in her rumpled traveling dress, but had no alternative clothing accessible without unpacking her trunk, which remained strapped to her horse. "I appreciate everything you've done, Mr. James Owen," she corrected herself. "I fear I was woefully unprepared for this journey." Owen nodded, stirring the stew. "Montana territory isn't forgiving to the unprepared. What made you take on such a journey alone?" Rebecca stared into the fire, weighing how much to reveal. "My parents died last winter influenza. There was nothing left for me in Chicago except debts and memories. When I saw the advertisement for a teacher in Riverside, it seemed providential." Owen said nothing for a moment, then quietly offered, "I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you." Rebecca accepted his simple condolence with gratitude, finding it more genuine than the many elaborate expressions of sympathy she'd received in Chicago. They ate in companionable silence as the sun began its descent. Rebecca found herself studying Owen when he wasn't looking, the way his hands moved confidently as he worked, the subtle expressions that crossed his face, the quiet strength he exuded without effort. "You should rest more," Owen said as they finished eating. "We can start for Riverside tomorrow if you're feeling stronger, but it'll be a slow ride." Rebecca nodded, suddenly exhausted despite having done nothing all day. Owen helped her back to the lean-to, and she was asleep within minutes of lying down. The next morning dawned clear and cooler. Rebecca woke feeling much improved, though still weaker than she would have liked. She found Owen already awake, coffee brewing over a fresh fire. "Good morning," she called, carefully making her way to the fire. Owen looked up with a smile that transformed his serious face. "Morning. You're looking better." "I feel better, thanks to your care," Rebecca replied, accepting the coffee he offered. "I believe I can travel today if you're still willing to accompany me to Riverside." "Of course," Owen said, "but we'll take it slow. No sense risking another collapse." After a breakfast of hardtack and the last of the rabbit stew, they broke camp. Owen helped Rebecca mount her mare, then packed his gear efficiently. Within an hour, they were on the trail toward Riverside. Rebecca was surprised at how attentive Owen was without being overbearing. He rode beside her, occasionally pointing out landmarks or sharing stories of his years in the territory. He had a quiet humor that emerged in unexpected moments, making her laugh despite her lingering fatigue. "How long have you been in Montana?" she asked as they rode through a small valley dotted with wildflowers. "Since '68, Owen replied. "Came west after the war with not much more than the clothes on my back and ended up staying." "You fought in the war?" Rebecca asked, noting that he would have been quite young during the conflict. Owen nodded. "Last year of it. Enlisted at 17, saw enough to know I didn't want to go back east afterward." His tone discouraged further questions on the topic, and Rebecca respected his reticence. Instead, she shared her own background, her childhood in Chicago, her education at a women's seminary, her brief experience teaching at a charity school before her parents' illness had forced her to abandon the position to care for them. "So Riverside will be your first real teaching position?" Owen asked. "Yes," Rebecca admitted, "but I'm well qualified, I assure you. The school board seemed satisfied with my credentials." "I've no doubt," Owen said with a smile. "Riverside's lucky to get an educated lady like yourself. Town's growing fast, lots of families moving in." "They built the schoolhouse last year, nice building, from what I heard." They stopped at midday to rest the horses and eat a simple lunch of jerky and dried fruit from Owen's supplies. Rebecca found herself growing increasingly comfortable in Owen's company, a fact that both pleased and concerned her. A young woman alone with a man she'd just met would be scandalous in Chicago. Yet out here in the wilderness, Such conventions seemed distant and unimportant. As they resumed their journey, Rebecca's thoughts turned to practical matters. Will there be lodging available in Riverside? The school board mentioned arrangements would be made, but I have no specific details. Town has a small hotel, Owen replied. Nothing fancy but clean and respectable. Run by a widow named Mrs. Peterson. Most likely they've arranged for you to stay there until more permanent accommodations can be found. The terrain became more varied as they continued, with stands of ponderosa pine breaking up the open grassland. The mountains loomed closer, their snow-capped peaks gleaming in the afternoon sun. It's beautiful here, Rebecca said softly. So different from Chicago. Takes some getting used to, Owen acknowledged. The space, the silence. Some folks can't abide it, but I can't imagine living any other way now. They rode in silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. Rebecca found herself stealing glances at her companion, noting the easy way he sat his horse, the alert awareness with which he scanned their surroundings, the gentleness in his eyes when he looked at her. It was mid-afternoon, when Rebecca began to feel the strain of riding. Though she tried to hide her discomfort, Owen noticed immediately. We should rest again, he suggested, guiding them toward a copse of trees beside a small creek. No need to push too hard. Rebecca didn't argue, grateful for his perception. They dismounted, and Owen helped her to sit on a fallen log while he watered the horses. How much farther to Riverside? Rebecca asked when he returned. About 5 more miles, Owen replied. We should make it by sundown if we take it easy. Rebecca nodded, trying to hide her relief. Though much recovered, she was still weaker than she'd realized and longed for a proper bed and a change of clothes. They rested for nearly an hour before continuing. As they rode, the landscape gradually showed more signs of human habitation, fenced pastures in the distance, the occasional wisp of smoke from an unseen chimney, a rutted wagon road joining their trail. The sun was low in the sky when they crested a gentle rise, and Rebecca caught her first glimpse of Riverside. The town was smaller than she'd expected, perhaps 30 buildings clustered along a main street that ran parallel to the broad river that gave the settlement its name. A church steeple rose above the other structures, and several plumes of smoke indicated occupied homes. There it is, Owen said, a note of fondness in his voice. Not much to look at compared to Chicago, I expect, but it's a good town with good people. It looks welcoming, Rebecca replied honestly. The sight of the little town nestled against the backdrop of mountains with the river gleaming in the evening light was undeniably picturesque. As they approached, Rebecca became acutely aware of her disheveled appearance. Her traveling dress was wrinkled and dusty, her hair hastily pinned up that morning without the benefit of a brush or mirror. She was making a poor first impression, she feared. Owen seemed to sense her discomfort. Don't worry about how you look, he said quietly. Anyone who'd judge you harshly after what you've been through isn't worth your concern. His words were reassuring, though Rebecca still wished for a moment of privacy to make herself more presentable before meeting her new employers. The main street was quiet as they entered town, though several people stopped to watch their approach with curious expressions. Owen nodded greeting to a few men who called his name, but didn't stop to chat. He led them directly to a 2-story clapboard building with a sign reading Riverside Hotel. A small porch fronted the establishment, with several rocking chairs placed invitingly. As Owen helped Rebecca dismount, the door opened and a plump, middle-aged woman emerged, wiping her hands on her apron. "Owen James, as I live and breathe," the woman exclaimed. "Didn't expect to see you till roundup." "Evening, Mrs. Peterson," Owen replied with a smile. "Had a bit of a detour." "This is Miss Rebecca Johnson, your new school teacher." The woman's eyes widened as she took in Rebecca's condition. "Merciful heavens! We've been worried sick about you, Miss Johnson. The stagecoach company sent word 3 days ago that you decided to continue on horseback, and when you didn't arrive yesterday as expected." She hurried forward. "You poor dear, you look exhausted." Rebecca summoned a smile. "I had some difficulties on the trail. Mr. James found me when I collapsed from exhaustion and has been kind enough to see me safely to town." Mrs. Peterson shot Owen an approving look. "Thank the Lord he found you. Come inside, dear. Your room is ready, and I'll have a hot bath brought up right away." Rebecca turned to Owen, suddenly reluctant to part from him. "I don't know how to thank you properly for all you've done." Owen shook his head. "No thanks needed. Anyone would have done the same." "Not anyone," Rebecca disagreed softly. "Not everyone would have shown such kindness and care." A faint color touched Owen's cheeks. "I'll see to your horse and have your trunk brought in," he said, turning away. Mrs. Peterson led Rebecca inside, clucking sympathetically over her condition and assuring her that everything had been prepared for her arrival. The hotel was modest but clean, with a small dining room off the main lobby and a parlor where a few men sat reading newspapers. "The school board will want to meet you, of course," Mrs. Peterson said as she showed Rebecca to her room on the second floor. "But I'll tell them you need at least a day to recover from your journey. Mr. Thornton, he's the board president, he can be a bit impatient, but his wife will set him straight if he tries to rush you." Rebecca smiled gratefully. "Thank you, Mrs. Peterson. I appreciate your understanding." The room was small but comfortable, with a narrow bed, a washstand, a small writing desk, and a wardrobe. A window overlooked the main street, and Rebecca could see Owen below, still tending to the horses. "I'll send up hot water for your bath," Mrs. Peterson said. "And some dinner afterward if you're feeling up to it. Or would you prefer to join the other guests in the dining room?" "I think I'd prefer to eat in my room tonight," Rebecca replied, suddenly aware of how tired she still was. "But perhaps Mr. James would join me. I'd like to thank him properly before he leaves." Mrs. Peterson's eyebrows rose slightly, but she nodded. "I'll ask him. Though propriety would suggest, we can leave the door open," Rebecca said quickly, aware of how her request might be interpreted. I owe him my life, Mrs. Peterson." The older woman's expression softened. "Of course, dear, I'll see to it." Left alone, Rebecca sank onto the bed, the enormity of the past 2 days washing over her. She had nearly died on that trail, might now be lying there still if Owen James hadn't happened along. The thought was sobering. The promised bath arrived soon after, brought up by Mrs. Peterson, and a young maid who filled a copper tub behind a folding screen. Rebecca thanked them and gratefully sank into the warm water once they'd gone, washing away the dust and sweat of the trail. She felt almost human again by the time she dried off and changed into a fresh dress from her trunk, which had been delivered while she bathed. A soft knock at the door announced dinner. Rebecca opened it to find Mrs. Peterson with a loaded tray and Owen standing awkwardly behind her. "Here we are," Mrs. Peterson announced, bustling into the room and setting the tray on the small table by the window. "Beef stew, fresh bread, and apple pie. I'll just leave this door open as agreed." She gave Owen a pointed look before departing. Owen remained in the doorway, hat in hand, looking uncertain. "Please come in," Rebecca invited. "I know it's unconventional, but I wanted to thank you properly before you go." Owen stepped inside, though he kept a respectful distance and remained standing until Rebecca gestured to the chair opposite hers at the small table. "You're looking better," he observed as he sat down. "Some color back in your cheeks." "A hot bath works wonders," Rebecca replied with a smile. "Please, eat with me. Mrs. Peterson has sent enough for two." The meal was simple but delicious, far better than the trail food they'd shared the day before. Rebecca found herself watching Owen as he ate, noticing how he handled the silverware with surprising grace for a cowboy. "Tell me about the Diamond K," she said. "Is that where you'll go now?" Owen nodded. "Big spread about 10 miles south of here. Owner's a good man, Clive Kincaid. Been working for him on and off for 5 years now." "And after the roundup, where will you go then?" Owen shrugged. "Depends on what offers come up. Might head to Wyoming for the winter or down to Colorado. Might stay here if there's work." The uncertainty of his life struck Rebecca as both freeing and lonely. "Don't you ever wish for something more permanent?" she asked. A shadow crossed Owen's face. "Used to. Not so much anymore." Something in his tone discouraged further questions on that line, so Rebecca changed the subject. "Mrs. Peterson mentioned the school board president, Mr. Thornton. What can you tell me about him?" Owen seemed relieved at the change of topic. "George Thornton. Owns the Mercantile. Fair businessman, though a bit full of his own importance. His wife Alina is on the board too. She's the one who pushed hardest for hiring a proper teacher." As they finished eating, Rebecca felt a growing reluctance to see Owen leave. His presence had become a comfort over the past 2 days, and the thought of facing her new life in Riverside without his steady support was unexpectedly daunting. "Will I see you again?" she asked as he rose to go, then blushed at her own forwardness. Owen's eyes held hers for a moment. "I expect so. Riverside's not that big, and I come into town regular when I'm working at the Diamond K." Rebecca nodded, trying to hide her disappointment at his non-committal answer. "Well, should our paths cross, I hope you'll stop and say hello." "I will," Owen promised. He hesitated, then added, "Take care of yourself, Rebecca, and if you need anything at all, you can get word to me through Mrs. Peterson." The use of her first name sent a small thrill through Rebecca. "Thank you, Owen, for everything." After he left, Rebecca stood at the window watching him walk down the street toward the livery stable. His tall figure moved with the same quiet confidence she'd observed on the trail, neither hurrying nor dawdling. Just before he turned the corner, he glanced back at the hotel, and Rebecca stepped away from the window quickly, not wanting to be caught staring. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity. True to Mrs. Peterson's prediction, the school board granted Rebecca a day to recover before summoning her to a meeting at the Mercantile. George Thornton was indeed pompous, but his wife Alina proved to be a warm, intelligent woman who clearly valued education. "We've 15 students enrolled already," Alina told Rebecca enthusiastically. "Ages 6 to 14. Most have had some schooling, but a few of the ranchers' children have never had formal instruction." Rebecca was shown the schoolhouse, a simple but well-built structure at the end of the main street, with rows of benches, a teacher's desk on a raised platform, a blackboard, and even a small shelf of books donated by various townspeople. "It's lovely," Rebecca said sincerely. "When may I begin?" "Monday next," George Thornton declared. "That gives you 3 more days to settle in and prepare. The position includes lodging, by the way. There's a small cottage behind the school that was completed last month specifically for the teacher." Rebecca was delighted to learn of the cottage. Though Mrs. Peterson's hotel was comfortable, the prospect of her own home, however modest, was appealing. The cottage proved to be a single room with a small kitchen area, a bed, a writing desk, a rocking chair, and a small pot-bellied stove. It was sparsely furnished but clean, with windows that let in ample light and a small porch overlooking a patch of wildflowers. "It's perfect," Rebecca declared as Alina Thornton showed her around. "It's not much," Alina said apologetically. "But we thought you'd prefer privacy to boarding with a family." "You thought correctly," Rebecca assured her. "I'm accustomed to simple living, and this is more than adequate." With Alina's help, Rebecca moved her belongings from the hotel to the cottage that same day. The women of the town, curious about their new schoolteacher, began stopping by with small gifts: a pieced quilt, a basket of fresh eggs, a loaf of bread still warm from the oven. Rebecca was touched by their kindness and gradually began to feel that perhaps Riverside could truly become home. Throughout these busy days, Rebecca found her thoughts returning often to Owen James. She scanned the streets whenever she went out, hoping for a glimpse of his tall figure, but he remained absent. When she finally asked Mrs. Peterson about him, the older woman smiled knowingly. "The Diamond K hands won't be in town until Saturday night, most likely. Roundup's a busy time, dawn to dusk work with no breaks." Rebecca tried to hide her disappointment, busying herself with preparations for the school term. She drafted lesson plans, arranged the schoolroom to her liking, and met with parents who brought their children to be introduced to their new teacher. Saturday dawned clear and warm. Rebecca spent the morning at the schoolhouse, organizing her first week's lessons, then returned to her cottage to prepare a simple lunch. As she ate, she heard the distant sound of hoofbeats and men's voices. Moving to the window, she saw a group of riders entering town: cowboys returning from the roundup. Their clothes dusty and faces tired, but voices raised in cheerful conversation. Her heart quickened as she scanned the group, but Owen wasn't among them. Scolding herself for her schoolgirl reaction, Rebecca returned to her meal, determined not to dwell on her rescuer's absence. That evening, the sound of piano music and laughter drifted from the saloon at the end of the street. Rebecca sat on her porch in the gathering twilight, listening to the distant revelry and wondering if Owen was there among the celebrating cowboys. It seemed unlikely given what she knew of his quiet nature, but perhaps the boisterous atmosphere appealed to him after days of hard work. She was about to go inside when she spotted a lone figure walking down the street toward her cottage. Even in the dim light, she recognized Owen's distinctive gait. He carried something in his hands and seemed to be heading directly toward her. Rebecca stood, smoothing her skirt self-consciously. "Good evening," she called as he approached. Owen stopped at the edge of her small yard, hat in hand. "Evening, Miss Johnson. Hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all," Rebecca replied, unable to keep the pleasure from her voice. "And please, it's Rebecca." "After all we've been through, formality seems unnecessary." Owen nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Rebecca, then." He held out the bundle in his hands. "Brought you something for your cottage." Rebecca accepted the gift, unwrapping the burlap to reveal a small carved wooden box with a hinged lid. The top was decorated with an intricate pattern of wildflowers, each petal and leaf rendered with surprising delicacy. "It's beautiful," she breathed, running her fingers over the smooth wood. "Did you make this?" Owen nodded, a hint of color touching his cheeks. "Been working on it in the evenings. Thought you might need something to keep letters or trinkets in." Rebecca was deeply touched by the thoughtful gift. "Thank you, I shall treasure it." She hesitated, then added, "Would you like to come in for coffee? Or is that too forward of me?" Owen glanced toward the cottage door, then back at her. "Coffee would be nice if you're sure it's proper." "We'll leave the door open," Rebecca said with a smile, echoing her words from the hotel. "And anyone who disapproves can take it up with Mrs. Peterson, who approves of you entirely." This drew a chuckle from Owen as he followed her inside. The cottage was small enough that his presence seemed to fill it, though he moved carefully, as if conscious of taking up too much space. Rebecca busied herself with preparing coffee on the small stove, while Owen looked around, admiring the few personal touches she'd added to the sparse furnishings: a crocheted doily on the writing desk, a vase of wildflowers on the windowsill, her books arranged neatly on a shelf. "You've made it homey already," he observed. "I've had practice making temporary lodgings feel like home," Rebecca replied, pouring the coffee into 2 cups. "Though I hope this one will be more permanent." They sat at the small table by the window, the door left deliberately ajar to satisfy propriety. Through it, they could hear the distant sounds of the town piano music from the saloon, occasional laughter, the bark of a dog. "How was the roundup?" Rebecca asked. "Successful." "No major mishaps, good count on the calves." Owen sipped his coffee. "Heard you met the school board and got settled in quick. News travels fast in a small town," Rebecca observed with a smile. "That it does." Owen set down his cup. "Mrs. Thornton speaks highly of you. Says you're already organizing a lending library for the town." Rebecca nodded, pleased that he'd heard about her project. "Books were my greatest comfort after my parents died. I'd like to share that comfort with others, especially the children." They talked easily as they drank their coffee, Rebecca sharing her plans for the school and Owen telling stories of the roundup that made her laugh. There was a comfort to their conversation that belied their short acquaintance, as if they'd known each other far longer. When Owen finally rose to leave, Rebecca found herself reluctant to end the evening. "Will you be staying in the area long?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "Through the fall, at least," Owen replied. "Mr. Kincaid's asked me to help with breaking some new horses after the roundup's fully done." "Then perhaps I'll see you in town occasionally," Rebecca ventured. Owen nodded, his blue eyes holding hers. "I'd like that. Maybe next Saturday if you're not too busy with school preparations." Rebecca's heart lifted at the suggestion. Saturday would be perfect. Owen hesitated at the door, seeming on the verge of saying something more. Instead, he simply nodded again and said, "Good night, Rebecca." "Good night, Owen," she replied softly. After he left, Rebecca sat for a long time with the carved box in her hands, tracing the delicate pattern of flowers and wondering at the gentle soul hidden beneath Owen's rugged exterior. The following Monday, Rebecca welcomed her students to the schoolhouse for the first time. The children were a diverse group, from the sophisticated 13-year-old daughter of the bank manager who had attended school in Denver before her family moved to Riverside, to a shy 6-year-old boy from one of the outlying ranches who had never held a slate pencil before. Rebecca quickly established a routine, dividing the students into groups based on their abilities rather than strictly by age. The work was challenging but rewarding, and she found herself looking forward to each day with growing enthusiasm. The week passed quickly, filled with lessons, grading, and preparing for the following week. Rebecca had little time to dwell on thoughts of Owen, though he crossed her mind in quiet moments when she placed a letter in the wooden box he'd carved, or when she glimpsed a rider in the distance who reminded her of him. Saturday arrived sunny and mild. Rebecca completed her school preparations by noon, then spent an hour carefully dressing in one of her better dresses, a sky blue cotton with white lace at the collar and cuffs. She was pinning up her hair when a knock sounded at her door. Owen stood on her porch, freshly shaved and wearing a clean shirt, his usual dusty hat replaced with a newer one. He held a small bunch of wildflowers in his hand. "Thought you might like to see a bit of the countryside," he said, offering the flowers. "If you're feeling up to a ride, that is." Rebecca accepted the bouquet with delight. "I'd love to. Let me just put these in water." Once the flowers were arranged in her vase, Rebecca retrieved her bonnet and riding gloves. Owen escorted her to the livery where he had arranged for her mare to be saddled and waiting. The livery owner, a grizzled man named Henry, gave them a knowing wink that made Rebecca blush. They rode out of town at an easy pace, following a trail that wound along the river. The day was perfect for riding, with a gentle breeze keeping the heat at bay and puffy white clouds dotting the azure sky. Owen proved to be a knowledgeable guide, pointing out landmarks and sharing the history of the area. "That ridge there," he said, indicating a rocky outcropping in the distance, was a lookout point for the Blackfoot tribe before the settlers came. "On a clear day you can see for 20 miles from the top." "You know a great deal about this land," Rebecca observed. Owen nodded. "Been all over this territory. A man learns to read the land when his life depends on it." They stopped for a picnic lunch in a sheltered grove beside the river. Owen had packed a surprisingly sophisticated meal: cold chicken, fresh bread, cheese, and even a small jar of preserves. "Did you prepare all this yourself?" Rebecca asked, impressed. Owen smiled. "The Diamond K cook owed me a favor, said it was the least he could do considering." "Considering what?" "Considering I've been talking about you all week, according to him." The admission brought a blush to Rebecca's cheeks and a flutter to her stomach. "Have you?" Owen looked slightly embarrassed. "Seems I might have mentioned you once or twice, or more." They ate in companionable silence, the only sounds the burbling of the river and the occasional call of birds. Rebecca found herself studying Owen when he wasn't looking, admiring the strong lines of his profile and the gentle way his hands moved as he arranged their meal. "Tell me about your family," she said as they finished eating. "Are your parents still living?" Owen's expression shuddered slightly. "No. Lost my father in the war. He was a Union officer killed at Petersburg. My mother passed 2 years later, had an older brother who died at Gettysburg." "I'm so sorry," Rebecca said softly, reaching out impulsively to touch his hand. "So you were alone very young?" Owen nodded, his eyes on their hands. 17 when Mother died, enlisted not long after, seemed the thing to do at the time. Rebecca understood loss all too well. "My parents were all the family I had too," she said. "No siblings, just cousins back east whom I barely know." Owen turned his hand to clasp hers briefly. "Seems we have that in common, then." The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken understanding. Then Owen gently released her hand and began packing away the remains of their lunch. They spent the afternoon exploring, riding up to a plateau that offered a magnificent view of the valley below. Riverside was visible in the distance, a cluster of buildings nestled against the river, smoke rising from chimneys in thin plumes against the sky. "It's beautiful," Rebecca said, taking in the panoramic vista. "I can see why you love this land so much." Owen nodded, his eyes on the horizon. "It gets in your blood, the space, the freedom of it." "Do you ever miss the East?" Rebecca asked. "No," Owen replied without hesitation. "Too many ghosts there." They rode back to town as the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the landscape. The conversation flowed easily between them, ranging from books they had read to their hopes for the future. Rebecca found herself speaking more openly with Owen than she had with anyone since her parents' deaths. As they approached the outskirts of Riverside, Owen slowed his horse. "I've enjoyed today," he said, his voice low. "Thank you for coming." "I've enjoyed it too," Rebecca replied warmly. "Very much." Owen hesitated, then added, "I'll be in town next weekend as well. Perhaps we could do this again." Rebecca's heart lifted at the suggestion. "I'd like that very much." The following weeks fell into a pattern that brought Rebecca increasing happiness. Weekdays were devoted to her students, whom she came to care for deeply. The school board expressed approval of her methods, particularly when several children who had previously shown little interest in learning began to thrive under her guidance. Saturdays were reserved for Owen. Sometimes they rode out into the countryside. Other times they simply walked along the river or sat talking on Rebecca's porch. Each meeting deepened their connection. revealing new aspects of each other's character and history. Rebecca learned that Owen had a passion for reading despite his limited formal education, often carrying a dog-eared volume of Emerson or Whitman in his saddlebags. He discovered her love of music and talent for drawing, admiring the small sketches she made of the landscape and local wildlife. As autumn approached, bringing cooler temperatures and hints of gold to the leaves, Rebecca realized with a start that she had fallen in love with the quiet cowboy. The revelation came on a Saturday afternoon as they sat by the river, Owen reading aloud from Leaves of Grass, while Rebecca sketched his profile against the backdrop of mountains. The sound of his voice, the gentle strength in his hands as he held the book, the way sunlight caught in his hair all combined to create a wave of emotion so powerful it nearly took her breath away. Owen must have sensed something in her silence, for he paused in his reading and looked up. "Everything all right?" Rebecca nodded, unable to trust her voice. How could she tell him what she had just realized? What if he didn't share her feelings? The thought of losing the easy companionship they had developed was too painful to contemplate. But as Owen returned to his reading, his voice caressing Whitman's words with subtle emotion, Rebecca caught him watching her with an expression that mirrored her own tumultuous feelings. Perhaps, she thought with a surge of hope, perhaps he felt the same. The answer came the following Saturday. Owen arrived at her cottage with his usual punctuality, but there was a nervous energy about him that was new. Instead of suggesting a ride or walk as was their custom, he asked if they might sit on her porch for a while. "There's something I need to say," he began once they were seated, his hat turning slowly in his hands. "And I'm not much good with words, despite all the poetry I read." Rebecca's heart quickened. "You can tell me anything, Owen, you know that." He nodded, his blue eyes serious. "These past weeks have been the happiest I can remember. Being with you, talking, riding, just sitting quiet together, it's made me realize something I've been running from for years." "What's that?" Rebecca asked softly, hardly daring to hope. "That I've been lonely. That I've been using the vastness of this land to hide from people, from connections, from the possibility of loss." Owen leaned forward, his gaze intense. "But you make me want to stop running, Rebecca. You make me want to stay in one place, with you." Rebecca felt tears spring to her eyes. "Owen, let me finish before my courage fails," he said quickly. "I know I'm not the kind of man you probably dreamed of back in Chicago. I'm just a cowhand with little to offer besides my hands and heart. But if that's enough, if I'm enough, I'd be honored if you'd consider becoming my wife." The words hung in the air between them, raw with honesty and hope. Rebecca felt her tears spill over as joy welled up within her. "Yes," she whispered, reaching for his hands. "Yes, Owen, you are more than enough. You are everything I never knew I needed until I found you, or rather, until you found me." Owen's face transformed with relief and happiness. He lifted her hands to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles with such reverence that fresh tears sprang to Rebecca's eyes. "I love you," he said simply. "Have since I carried you to that spring, I think, though I didn't recognize it then." "And I love you," Rebecca replied, her voice steady despite her tears. "With all my heart." Owen stood, drawing her up with him. With exquisite gentleness, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her softly, a kiss that held promise and tenderness and the beginning of a shared future. When they parted, Owen rested his forehead against hers, his voice low with emotion. "I never thought I'd find home in a person rather than a place." Rebecca smiled through her tears. "Nor I, but here we are." Their engagement caused a minor sensation in Riverside. Most reactions were positive misses. Peterson claimed she'd predicted it from the day Owen brought Rebecca to the hotel, and Alina Thornton was delighted by the match. A few tongues wagged about the speed of their courtship, but such concerns were generally dismissed in a frontier town where practicality often outweighed convention. The school board had no objection to Rebecca continuing her teaching after marriage, particularly since qualified teachers were scarce. The only stipulation was that she and Owen find accommodation outside the teacher's cottage, which was designated specifically for a single teacher. This presented a challenge, as Owen had no permanent home, having lived primarily in bunkhouses and camps during his years as a cowhand. The solution came unexpectedly from Clive Kincaid, owner of the Diamond K. "Got a small cabin on the north edge of my property," he told Owen one evening in late September. "Built it years back for my foreman, but he's moved into town with his new wife. Been sitting empty since spring. You're welcome to it if you want to fix it up a bit. Good land around it, too, enough for a small herd if you've a mind to start your own spread someday." Owen was overwhelmed by the offer. "That's mighty generous, Mr. Kincaid. I don't know what to say." The older man clapped him on the shoulder. "Say you'll stay on at the Diamond K, at least part-time. You're the best horse breaker I've got, and I'd hate to lose you entirely. The cabin's yours either way, though." Owen accepted gratefully, eager to show Rebecca their potential home. The following Saturday, he took her to see the cabin, which stood in a sheltered valley about 5 miles from Riverside, a reasonable distance for Rebecca to travel to the school each day. The cabin was rustic but soundly built, with 2 rooms, a stone fireplace, and a small porch. It needed repairs, a new roof in places, some chinking between logs, a thorough cleaning, but the structure was solid. A small barn stood nearby, with a corral that needed mending. "It's not much," Owen said as they stood in the main room, sunlight streaming through windows that needed washing. "Nothing like what you were used to in Chicago, I expect." Rebecca turned to him, her eyes shining. "It's perfect, Owen. Absolutely perfect. I can already see how it will look when we've fixed it up: curtains at the windows, a braided rug before the fireplace, your books on shelves along that wall." Owen pulled her into his arms, marveling at the joy in her face as she surveyed their humble future home. "You're sure? It'll be a hard life, at least at first." Rebecca nodded against his chest. "I'm sure. The hardest part of my life was before I met you, not knowing where I belonged. Now I know I belong with you, wherever that may be." They were married on a crisp October afternoon in Riverside's small church. The entire town turned out for the occasion, the schoolchildren serving as unofficial attendants. Rebecca wore a new dress of deep blue silk, a gift from Eleanor Thornton, who insisted the teacher needed something special for her wedding day. Owen wore a new suit purchased in the county seat, looking handsome if somewhat uncomfortable in the formal attire. After a reception at the hotel, where Mrs. Peterson outdid herself with a feast that would be talked about for months, Owen and Rebecca rode to their cabin in the fading light of day. Owen had worked tirelessly in the weeks preceding the wedding to make the cabin habitable, with help from several of the Diamond K hands. The roof was repaired, the chimney cleaned, the windows washed and fitted with curtains Rebecca had sewn. Basic furniture had been acquired: a bed, a table and chairs, a rocking chair for the porch. As they approached, Rebecca caught her breath at the sight of light glowing in the windows. Someone had come ahead to light the lamps and build a fire in the fireplace. Smoke curled from the chimney into the darkening sky, a beacon of welcome. Owen drew their horses to a halt before the cabin. Before Rebecca could dismount, he was at her side, reaching up to lift her from the saddle. But instead of setting her down, he cradled her in his arms as he had that first day on the trail. "What are you doing?" Rebecca laughed, her arms going around his neck. "Carrying you over the threshold properly," Owen replied with a smile. "Seems fitting, considering how we met." He carried her up the steps and across the threshold into their home, setting her gently on her feet in the warm glow of lamplight. Rebecca looked around in delight and surprise. Vases of autumn wildflowers stood on the table and mantelpiece, and a colorful quilt, another gift from the women of Riverside, was draped across their bed, visible through the open door to the bedroom. "It's wonderful," she breathed, turning to face Owen. "Our home." Owen took her hands in his expression solemn despite the joy in his eyes. "I may not be able to give you all the comforts you deserve, but I promise you this, Rebecca, I will love you and care for you all the days of my life." Rebecca reached up to touch his face, her heart overflowing. "And I promise to love and cherish you through whatever life brings us, Owen James. You are my home, my heart, my everything." Their first months of marriage passed in a whirl of activity and adjustment. Rebecca continued teaching, riding to town each morning and returning in the afternoon. Owen divided his time between the Diamond K and their own small homestead, gradually building up a herd of cattle and horses with his earnings, and the animals gifted to them as wedding presents. They settled into a rhythm of shared work and shared joy. Evenings were spent by the fire, reading aloud or simply talking about their day. Weekends were devoted to improving their home and land, building shelves for Rebecca's growing library of books for the school, constructing a chicken coop, planting a garden that would bear fruit the following spring. As winter descended on the Montana territory, bringing deep snow and bitter cold, Rebecca and Owen found warmth in each other's company and the snug shelter of their cabin. On the coldest nights, they lay close beneath their quilts, sharing stories and dreams and the simple comfort of being together. "I never thought I could be this happy," Rebecca murmured one such night as they lay watching firelight dance on the ceiling. "Even before my parents died, I never quite felt I belonged anywhere. But here with you." Owen pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I know. I spent years wandering, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. Now I can't imagine being anywhere but here with you." When spring came, bringing new growth and longer days, Rebecca discovered she was expecting a child. The news brought tears of joy to Owen's eyes and a new sense of purpose to their shared life. "We'll need to expand the cabin," he said, already planning. "Add a proper bedroom for the little one." Rebecca laughed at his immediate practical concerns. "We have months yet before that's necessary, though I should probably begin sewing baby clothes soon." The news of their impending parenthood spread quickly through Riverside. Eleanor Thornton immediately began organizing the women of the town to prepare a baby quilt and layette. Mrs. Peterson insisted that Rebecca reduce her teaching schedule as her condition advanced, offering the services of her niece as an assistant teacher. Owen became even more protective, insisting on accompanying Rebecca to and from school whenever possible and taking on additional work to save money for the baby's arrival. His efforts to shield her from every discomfort might have been stifling had they not been so clearly born of love and concern. Summer arrived with its heat and thunderstorms, bringing new challenges for Rebecca as her pregnancy progressed. Yet even in her discomfort, she found joy in preparing for the child's arrival and watching Owen's careful creation of a cradle, carved with the same delicate wildflower pattern as the box he had given her so long ago. One evening in early August, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of gold and pink, Rebecca felt the baby move strongly beneath her hand. She reached for Owen's hand and placed it on her rounded belly, smiling at his look of wonder when he felt the movement. "Do you ever think about that day on the trail?" she asked softly. "When I collapsed and you found me?" Owen nodded, his hand still resting on her belly. "Often. I think about how close I came to taking a different route that day, how easily I might have missed seeing you." Rebecca shuddered at the thought. "I can't bear to think what might have happened." "But it didn't," Owen said firmly. "I found you. I carried you to safety, and now here we are." He leaned over to kiss her gently. "I think perhaps we were meant to find each other, Rebecca." All the trails we'd traveled before were leading us to that moment. Rebecca smiled, covering his hand with her own as their child moved beneath their joined touch. "I believe you're right. Of all the paths I might have taken, I'm grateful beyond words that mine led me to you." Their son was born on a clear September morning, arriving with a lusty cry that immediately captured his father's heart. They named him Thomas, after Rebecca's father, with James as his middle name. "He has your eyes," Rebecca said tiredly but happily as Owen held their son for the first time, his big hands cradling the tiny form with infinite gentleness. "And your determination," Owen replied with a tender smile. "Did you hear that cry? Strong-willed like his mother." The birth of Thomas James completed their family circle, bringing new dimensions of love and purpose to their lives. The cabin, expanded during the summer to include a small nursery, rang with the sounds of the baby's cries and coos, and later with his laughter and first words. Rebecca returned to teaching part-time when Thomas was 6 months old, bringing him with her to the schoolhouse where he charmed the older students and inspired the younger ones to practice their reading by teaching the baby. Owen adjusted his work schedule to care for Thomas when Rebecca was teaching, an arrangement that raised eyebrows among the more traditional townsfolk, but seemed perfectly natural to the James family. By the time Thomas was walking, Owen had established a modest but successful horse breeding operation, focusing on the strong, intelligent mounts needed by ranchers in the territory. Rebecca continued teaching, having found a vocation that fulfilled her as much as motherhood did. Together, they built a life rich in love, work, and shared purpose. On the 5th anniversary of the day Owen found Rebecca on the trail, they rode together to the spring where he had built her shelter that first night. Thomas, now 4 years old and an accomplished rider on his pony, accompanied them, excited for the picnic his mother had packed and the stories his father had promised to tell. As they sat in the shade of the rocks, Thomas playing nearby with a wooden horse Owen had carved for him, Rebecca looked at her husband with eyes full of love. "You remember what you said to me that first night?" she asked. "When I was barely conscious and you were trying to get me to drink." Owen smiled, reaching for her hand. "I said, 'Hang on, miss, I've got you,'" Rebecca nodded, squeezing his fingers. "You did have me, you've had me ever since." She leaned against his shoulder, watching their son's imaginative play. "And I've had you." Owen put his arm around her, drawing her close. "Always," he promised softly, "through whatever comes, always." As the afternoon sun gilded the landscape in golden light, Rebecca thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment, the collapse that had seemed like disaster but had led to rescue, the exhaustion that had led to rest, the chance meeting that had led to love. The trail had been long and sometimes difficult, but every step had led them home to each other. And that, she knew with absolute certainty, was where they were always meant to be.